I was standing in my kitchen last month, staring at a bag of rice I bought back in 2019. Still fine. Still good. And that got me thinking about everything else sitting in my pantry that I assumed had a shelf life, but actually doesn't. Most people throw away perfectly good food because of a date stamped on a package. That date is not always what you think it is. Some of it is about quality, not safety. And once you know which foods genuinely last forever, you start looking at your pantry completely differently. I started digging into this after a conversation with a friend who used to work in grocery distribution. She told me something that stuck with me. Grocery stores want you to think everything expires. It keeps you buying. But some of what's sitting on those shelves could survive a decade in your cupboard without a problem. So I made a list. 18 foods that basically never go bad if you store them right. Some of these will surprise you. One of them, number 9, is something almost everyone has in their kitchen right now and has no idea it lasts almost forever. Stick around for that one. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, go ahead and hit subscribe now. I post this kind of insider pantry knowledge every week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's get into it. Item number 1. White rice. White rice is where this whole idea clicked for me. Stored properly, in a sealed container, away from moisture, white rice can last upward of 20 years. It doesn't spoil the way people assume. The oils that cause spoilage in brown rice are mostly stripped out during processing, which is exactly why white rice holds up so much longer. Emergency preparedness groups and long-term food storage communities have used this fact for decades. It's part of why white rice shows up constantly in survival stockpiles and disaster prep kits. It's cheap, it's stable, and it barely changes over time. When I checked my own pantry, I found a bag I'd forgotten about for almost 3 years. I cooked it up expecting something off. It tasted completely normal. That was the moment I realized how much food I'd probably thrown away over the years for no real reason. If you want to stock up, buy white rice in bulk and transfer it into an airtight container, ideally with an oxygen absorber if you're going long term. Keep it somewhere cool and dry, away from sunlight. A basement shelf or a pantry corner works fine. This is the kind of thing that protects your grocery budget without you even noticing. You just always have it. Item number 2. Honey. Honey might be the most famous example of a food that doesn't expire, and for good reason. Archaeologists have found jars of honey in ancient tombs that were still edible thousands of years later. The natural chemistry of honey, low moisture and high acidity, makes it nearly impossible for bacteria to survive in it. Food scientists point to honey's low water content as the reason it resists spoilage almost indefinitely. As long as moisture doesn't get in, it stays stable. I used to throw out honey the second it turned cloudy and hard in the jar. I thought that meant it went bad. Turns out that's just crystallization, and it's completely normal. You just warm the jar in some hot water, and it goes right back to liquid. I felt a little embarrassed once I learned that, honestly. Buy honey in bulk when it's on sale, and don't panic if it crystallizes later. Store it in a sealed jar, away from direct sunlight, and it'll be usable for years, maybe decades. This is one of those quiet money savers nobody talks about, because most people are dumping out honey that's still perfectly fine. Item number 3. Salt. Salt is a mineral, not an organic food, and that's exactly why it doesn't spoil. There is no biological process happening inside a container of salt that would cause it to go bad. It doesn't support bacterial growth, and it doesn't oxidize the way fats or oils do. Long-term food storage experts consistently list salt as one of the few genuinely forever pantry items, right alongside sugar and honey. I started buying salt in bulk after I ran the numbers on how much I was spending on small containers versus a large bag. The savings were bigger than I expected, and I never once worried about it going bad in storage. Keep it dry, keep it sealed, and salt will outlast almost everything else in your kitchen. If you're stocking up for the long term, this is one of the easiest, cheapest items to buy in bulk right now. It's not glamorous, but it's one less thing you'll ever need to worry about running out of. Item number 4, granulated sugar. Sugar works the same way salt does. It's essentially inhospitable to bacteria because of how it absorbs moisture around it. Properly stored, granulated sugar can last indefinitely. The main enemy isn't time, it's humidity. If moisture gets in, it can clump or harden, but it's still safe to use even then. Retail data over the past few years has shown sugar prices climbing steadily due to weather disruptions affecting crop yields. That's part of why buying in bulk now, while you can, makes sense. I keep a large container of sugar in my pantry that I refill from bulk bags. I stopped buying the small boxes years ago once I realized how much extra I was paying per pound for basically the same product with a shorter shelf claim on the label. Store it in an airtight container. If it ever hardens, a little moisture and some time will loosen it right back up. This is one of the simplest things you can stockpile with zero risk. Item number 5. Pure maple syrup. This one surprised me the most. Unopened, pure maple syrup can last essentially forever if stored in a cool, dark place. Once opened, it needs refrigeration, but even then, it can last years past what you'd expect. The high sugar concentration in real maple syrup creates the same kind of hostile environment for bacteria that you see in honey. That's the science behind why it holds up so well. I used to assume maple syrup was one of those use it in a season or toss it items. When I actually looked into it, I found bottles in my own fridge that were nearly 2 years old and completely fine, still smelled right, still tasted right. If you see real maple syrup on sale, especially around fall, that's the time to stock up. Store unopened bottles in a dark cupboard and refrigerate once you crack the seal. You'll get far more use out of one bottle than you think. Item number 6. Powdered milk. Powdered milk is one of those items that quietly sits in survival kits and long-term storage lists for a reason. Properly sealed and stored in a cool, dry place, powdered milk can last 20 years or more, especially in nitrogen-packed cans designed for long-term storage. Emergency preparedness suppliers have leaned into this heavily, and you'll see powdered milk listed constantly in long-term food storage guides for exactly this reason. I bought a can of the long-term storage kind after a friend who's really into prepping recommended it. I was skeptical about the taste, honestly. It's not identical to fresh milk, but it's completely usable for cooking, baking, and even drinking in a pinch. If you're building any kind of emergency stockpile, this is one of the smartest additions. Look for sealed cans specifically designed for long-term storage rather than the everyday grocery store boxes, which have a shorter practical window. Item number 7. Dried beans. Dried beans, stored correctly, can last decades. They don't spoil in the traditional sense. What actually happens over time isn't spoilage, it's a slow toughening. Beans that are very old might take longer to cook and soften, but they remain completely safe to eat. Agricultural storage data has shown dried legumes holding nutritional value and safety for extremely long periods when kept dry and sealed, which is part of why they're a staple in every long-term food storage list I've come across. I found a bag of dried black beans in the back of my pantry that had to be at least 4 years old. I soaked them a little longer than usual, cooked them a little longer than usual, and they turned out completely normal. Buy dried beans in bulk, store them in airtight containers, and don't worry about a best buy date on the bag. This is one of the cheapest, most reliable proteins you can stockpile. Item number 8. Cornstarch. Cornstarch is another one of those quiet pantry items that basically never goes bad. As long as it stays dry, cornstarch has no real expiration point. It's a pure starch with nothing in it for bacteria to feed on. I only started paying attention to this after noticing how many baking staples in my pantry had expired dates that clearly didn't reflect any actual change in the product itself. I still have a box that's well past its printed date, and it thickens sauces exactly the way it always has. No difference at all. Keep it sealed, keep it dry, and don't feel pressured to toss it just because a date on the box says so. This is a small thing, but it adds up over the years if you stop replacing food that never actually needed replacing. Item number 9. Instant coffee. Okay, here's the one I promised you. Instant coffee, sealed and stored properly, can last well beyond its printed date, often 10 years or more, without a meaningful drop in quality. The freeze-drying process removes almost all the moisture, which is the main thing that would otherwise degrade it over time. I know this one surprises people because coffee feels like something that should go stale fast. Ground coffee does lose flavor relatively quickly. Instant coffee is a completely different product, and it behaves nothing like fresh grounds once it's sealed. I actually tested this myself. I found an unopened jar of instant coffee in a box of old kitchen supplies, easily 5 or 6 years old. I made a cup expecting it to taste flat or off. It tasted almost identical to a fresh jar. I was genuinely shocked. If instant coffee goes on sale, this is a smart item to stock up on. Store it sealed, away from heat and moisture, and you'll have a caffeine backup that lasts basically forever. This is exactly the kind of insider knowledge most people never think to use. Item number 10. Distilled white vinegar is acidic enough that it essentially preserves itself. Distilled white vinegar has an indefinite shelf life. It might change color slightly or develop some sediment over time, but it remains safe and effective for cooking, cleaning, and food preservation. Household budgeting circles have pushed vinegar hard over the last couple of years, not just as a cooking staple, but as a cheap multi-purpose cleaning product, which makes stockpiling it even more practical. I use vinegar for cleaning as much as I do for cooking now. I bought a big jug over a year ago, and it still works exactly the same as the day I opened it. Buy it in bulk if you use it for cleaning too, because you'll go through it faster than you expect once you start using it that way. Store it at room temperature, sealed, and it'll be ready whenever you need it. Item number 11. Hard liquor. Unopened. Hard liquor, like vodka, whiskey, and rum, essentially never expires. The high alcohol content acts as a natural preservative. Unlike wine or beer, spirits don't continue to age or degrade once bottled, especially if the seal hasn't been broken. Beverage industry data has shown collectors holding onto sealed bottles for decades without any meaningful change in quality, which is part of why rare, old bottles hold their value the way they do. I have a bottle that was a gift years ago that I never opened. I always assumed I needed to use it within some window. Turns out it's just sitting there, completely fine, whenever I decide to open it. If you're someone who stocks a home bar, buying quality spirits when they're discounted isn't a waste. Unopened, they'll be exactly the same whenever you finally open them, next year or in 10 years. Item number 12. Canned goods. This is the big one people always ask about. Low-acid canned goods, like canned vegetables, beans, and meats, can remain safe well beyond their printed dates, often for many years, as long as the can itself stays intact with no rust, bulging, or damage. Government and industry food safety guidance has consistently pointed to the can's condition, not the printed date, as the real factor that matters for safety. I went through my own pantry and found cans dated several years back. I checked each one for damage, and every single can was fine. I cooked one that night and it tasted completely normal. The rule here is simple. Check the can, not the date. If it's not bulging, leaking, rusted, or severely dented, it's very likely still good. Rotate your stock so older cans get used first, but don't panic and toss things just because of a printed date. This one item alone can change how much food you throw away every year. Item number 13. Pure vanilla extract. Real vanilla extract is another one people don't expect to see on this list. Because it's suspended in high-proof alcohol, pure vanilla extract essentially never expires. The alcohol content works the same way it does in liquor, keeping it stable indefinitely once sealed. Baking supply retailers have quietly acknowledged this for years, which is part of why you'll almost never see a hard expiration date printed on a bottle of real vanilla extract, only a best buy suggestion. I had a bottle sitting in my baking cabinet for what had to be 6 or 7 years. I almost tossed it out of habit before checking the ingredients and realizing it was pure extract, not imitation. It worked exactly like a fresh bottle. If you bake even occasionally, buying real vanilla extract in a larger bottle when it's discounted is one of the smarter long-term buys you can make. Keep it sealed and out of direct sunlight, and it will outlast almost everything else in your cabinet. Item number 14. Cocoa powder. Cocoa powder, kept dry and sealed, lasts far longer than most people assume. Its low moisture content and natural fat structure make it fairly resistant to spoilage. Over time, it might lose a bit of its punch and flavor, but it doesn't actually go bad the way fresh food does. Long-term storage guides consistently rank cocoa powder alongside sugar and flour as a pantry staple that holds up for years past its printed date if it's protected from humidity. I found a container of unsweetened cocoa powder in the back of a cabinet that I'd genuinely forgotten I owned. It had to be at least 2 years old. I used it in a batch of brownies, and nobody at the table noticed a thing. Store it in an airtight container, away from heat, and don't feel rushed to use it up. This is another one of those quiet staples worth having extra of on hand. Item number 15. Dried pasta. Dried pasta is deceptively durable, and it rarely gets credit for it. Because of how low its moisture content is, properly stored, dried pasta can remain safe and usable for many years beyond the date on the box, sometimes decades in the right conditions. Emergency food storage lists lean on dried pasta constantly, right alongside rice and beans, because it's cheap, stable, and takes up very little space for how much it feeds. I tested an old box that had been pushed to the back of a cabinet for a couple of years. I cooked it exactly the same way I always do. No difference in texture, no difference in taste. Buy dried pasta in bulk when it's discounted and store it in a cool, dry spot, ideally in a sealed container to keep pests and moisture out. It's one of the easiest, most versatile things to stock up on. Item number 16. Baking soda. Baking soda is often treated like it has a strict shelf life, and that's mostly a myth. Sealed and kept dry, baking soda doesn't spoil. What actually happens over time is a very slow loss of leavening strength, which mostly matters for baking, not for safety. Home economics and food science sources consistently point out that baking soda used for cleaning, deodorizing, or general household use never really expires in any meaningful sense at all. I had a box in my fridge that I'd completely lost track of. Instead of tossing it, I tested it in a simple recipe. It still worked fine. If I'd been worried about peak performance for a delicate cake, I might have grabbed a fresh box, but for everyday use, it did the job. Keep extra boxes sealed in your pantry for cooking, and don't be afraid to keep using an older box for cleaning or odor control. It's one of the cheapest, longest-lasting items you can stock up on. Item number 17. Bouillon cubes and powder bouillon is one of those items that quietly sits in the back of a cabinet for years without anyone thinking twice about it. Because it's dehydrated and often high in salt, bouillon resists spoilage extremely well. Sealed and stored properly, it can remain usable for many years past its printed date. Long-term food storage communities frequently recommend bouillon as a compact, lightweight way to add flavor and nutrition to stored meals, precisely because it holds up so well over time. I found a box of bouillon cubes in a drawer that had been there since before I could remember buying it. I used a couple in a soup one night, fully expecting a flat, stale taste. It tasted completely normal. If you cook with broth regularly, stocking up on bouillon cubes or powder is a smart, low-cost move. Keep it sealed and dry, and it will be ready whenever you need it, no matter how long it's been sitting there. Item number 18. Freeze-dried fruits and vegetables. This is the one that ties the whole list together for me. Freeze-drying removes almost all the moisture from food while preserving most of its nutrients, which is exactly why freeze-dried fruits and vegetables can last 25 years or more when sealed properly. The long-term food storage industry has built an entire category around this, and it's part of why you'll see freeze-dried produce showing up more and more in emergency preparedness kits and bulk pantry hauls. A relative of mine started stocking up on freeze-dried fruit a couple of years ago, mostly as snacks for her kids. I tried some myself, expecting a stale cardboard kind of taste. It was surprisingly close to fresh, just lighter and crunchier. If you want fruits and vegetables in your stockpile that will genuinely last for decades, freeze-dried is the way to go. Store sealed pouches or cans in a cool, dry place, and you'll have real produce available no matter how long it's been sitting on the shelf. Here's the pattern running through every single one of these. The printed date on packaging is mostly about quality and company liability, not actual safety. Once you understand the real science behind what makes food spoil, moisture, oxygen, bacteria, you start seeing your own pantry completely differently. This isn't about hoarding or panic buying. It's about not throwing money away on food that was never actually bad in the first place. It's about quietly building a stockpile of things that will always be useful, no matter what happens with prices or supply chains. Most people won't think about any of this until prices spike again or shelves start looking thin. By then, it's harder to find good deals. Right now, while things are calm, is exactly when smart stocking up happens. You don't need to do this all at once. Pick 2 or 3 items from this list, buy a little extra next time they're on sale, and store them properly. That's it. That's the whole strategy. If this opened your eyes even a little, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I'm covering more of this insider pantry and budget knowledge every week, stuff most people never stop to think about until it's too late. Drop a comment and let me know which item on this list surprised you the most. I read every single one. Stay sharp, stay stocked, and I'll see you in the next one.